Morning, welcome to season 2, episode 6, the grand finale of Future of Work. And today is all around the importance of professional development within the workplace. My name's Gavin O'Mara. I'm the CEO and founder of FE News. Also, happy World Book Day. You'll be glad to know that I'm not dressed up as Where's Wally. And my co-host today is Dan Howard from NCFE. Dan, I wonder if you could join us in the studio today. How are you, Dan?
Morning, I'm very well, thank you. And yourself?
Yeah, good. I think it would have been a bit of a statement.
Laughed at the whole Where's Wally thing.
Why not, Joey?
Next time.
Same time next week. Today's a really important one. This season's been great around looking at exploring the different aspects of future of work, and I think it's really important to be to covering what we're doing today. Really is all around professional development within the workplace, lifelong learning, lifelong like CPD. So work-based lifelong learning approach. Why is it so important then?
Oh gosh, I mean, if you think about it, Gareth, like the last 2 years have changed the way we work significantly. So, I'm in my dining room at the moment, and, historically I would have been in an office or out on the road visiting clients, customers, etc. So the fact that society has changed over the last couple of years means that working practices will probably have changed as well. I think, the approach to lifelong learning and why it's so important, to answer your question, it's fundamental in terms of productivity, satisfaction within the workplace, making sure that you've got the skills, the knowledge, and the workplace behaviors to succeed and have fulfilling careers, but not just within the world of work. Lifelong learning is lifelong and will add and contribute to your everyday life as well as your working life. So I think it's fundamental.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting as well of the future of work has changed. Like you're saying, where you're working at the moment is completely changed. We're talking before we all joined everyone. We have a little bit of a green room chat, and it's around what is local needs, but also what are national needs. The way the world of work has changed, isn't it? It's really interesting. I think also it's around those careers are changing as well. You don't just have that one job for. We've said this before. Gave an analogy of your dad, wasn't it? Around it's not the same career for forever. How crucial is it for CPD for people to upskill, progress, reach their potential?
Oh gosh, I mean, the thing is, not a lot of people will necessarily understand their potential in the first place, and I think that's really something to be explored there, because until you unlock and unleash what's within people, and leaders and managers across all different sectors within various organizations will be doing that every day within their businesses. Until you unlock and release and realize people's untapped potential, that's the beginning. And I practice what I preach. I'm very passionate about lifelong learning and the life-changing power of education. During the first lockdown, I was working from home and in isolation, etc. I did my master's because I wanted to make sure that I got something. I couldn't go out and socialize. I couldn't, I'd completed Netflix. So in that time, in between working, I did my master's, and that's taught me a lot more about myself, my strategic thinking, and hopefully will be that enhancement to kind of the next chapter within my own career. It's fun. It's so important, because if you don't continue that development within the workplace, how are you going to keep up with the advancements that are going on within particular industries, within technology? If you look at the digital, 4.0, and the whole digital revolution that we're going through at the moment, automation, all of that is going to require changes for people's approach to how they do their job, and that requires new knowledge, skills, and abilities.
Yeah, no, definitely, 100%. I must be doing the same as you. I went a bit bonkers on lockdown 1 in particular. I started going like course, like I want to do this, and like sort of like a bit like a man with a menu. Really, it was a
lot of if you look at the eligibility, when people were utilising the job retention scheme and putting colleagues on furlough, etc. We did this ourselves. You could still be eligible for training and development whilst on furlough. So what a lot of organisations will have done, probably like our own, is invest in the staff development and the workforce development whilst colleagues had time and capacity when on furlough. Because your greatest asset within your organisation is your people, and you have to invest in your people, which is then a positive investment in your workforce and your business.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, it's kicked off a couple of ideas for questions. Dan, for me to bring in our guests. I wonder if we can bring in our guests. We've got Jane and we've got Gareth. So, Jane, Gareth, wonder if you could join us in the studio. Hey, Jane.
Morning.
Hey, Gareth, how are you?
Morning.
So we've got Jane Grasson, head of People Policy at British Chamber of Commerce, Dr. Gareth Thomas, Managing Director at Skills and Employment Support. So thank you both for joining us today. I wonder if I could just kick off a question same question I started with Dan, really. How important is CPD within the workplace to support people to progress and enhance their organisational productivity? And Dan touched on it a bit there, but Gareth, I wonder if you could sort of kick us off.
There's a stat. Morning, everybody. There's a stat that hit me from a few years ago that lives with me still today, which was in 2018, the Institute for the Future authored a report. I think Dell Technologies published it. And in 2018, which is not very far away, not very far gone, over 85% of the jobs that would exist in the year 2030 didn't yet exist. So in terms of how important is continuing workplace development, that workforce development, the upskilling throughout your career, we don't yet know those jobs. Things like the human technology interface jobs, roles around AI and ethical management of AI and things like that, new areas that literally a few years ago just didn't exist, are going to be the real jobs that the young people leaving school and college today are going to be doing, but also those who are already in the workforce. 2030 is now only 8 years away. So if you're in your 50s, some of these new job titles are really daunting, really scary, because you grew up in an era where mobile phones were a huge invention, and you didn't have them. I remember getting my first mobile phone as a student.
Was it that big?
Yeah, but it was great because it meant I didn't have to queue at the phone box, which is just an alien concept to my nephews. And a phone box with a phone in it we saw the other day, which was revolutionary because it didn't have a defibrillator or a mini library in it. But those changes, if you take that into the workplace and look at the changes people and how daunting that is for individuals to think about what are they going to have to do for a living. But equally, so the continuing development throughout your career is absolutely critical these days, I think, more so than ever. And the rate of change with technology is exponential. It's not like it used to be. It is a rate you've never seen. Dan, you talked about working from home. I've been fortunate or unfortunate, whichever way you look at it, to work from home for the last 10 years or so. Lockdown didn't really change that for me. But what it did change was the amount of time that I no longer spend on the motorway or on a train. Now, trains were great because you can work on a train and you can be productive still while you're traveling. But the reality is we've been busier than ever, and we've managed to fit more in than ever.
Yeah, you've got ability to other people because other people are now using technology. They're now available to you a lot easier than they would have been to travel to say.
So their ways of working align to ours much better now. So in one way, that's been great. But in another way, trying to teach my parents to use online video conferencing was a nightmare. But they have been upskilled. They're retired. They're not in the workplace. But I think coming back to your point, Dan, it's not just about the workplace, Gavin, for me. This is about lifelong learning and how the world is changing and evolving. And unless you keep yourself learning and evolving, you get left behind, not just in work. So I think, and we'll come on to it later on, we're doing some work about future skills with East Midlands Chamber and developing one of the local skills improvement plans for Leicester and Leicestershire, and talking to employers about those future skills. What's fascinating is the link between how big a business is and how far in the future they're able to plan. So for the smaller businesses, they're only planning 6 months to 2 years out, whereas the big businesses are planning much further ahead. So it's, for me, it's not just how important it is, but it's how businesses can accommodate that and work with colleges and training providers to make that happen in universities.
If you think about the role of skills regionally, so a question for Jane probably. How significant do you think is that increased regional role now within skills development for both people that are either in employment or currently out of the workplace?
Oh, it's an exciting time, isn't it? We've got so many local employers offering really exciting career opportunities, but 4 in 5 firms are struggling to fill vacancies. So we've got this disconnect, and we think this regional approach to skills planning and getting businesses more involved is really going to help. It's going to make it easier to match the skills that the skills that businesses need for the jobs on offer to the training that there is in that local area, and prepare people for all those emerging roles that colleagues have just been talking about. We've got massive change in the workplace, and businesses need to upskill and reskill everybody in the workplace in order to be productive. So that's why chambers are really excited to be involved in the local skills improvement plans. Working with providers, stakeholders, colleges, universities, everybody in the local areas to really find out, where are the jobs of the future? Where are the jobs now? Where are the jobs coming from? What are the business growth and aspiration plans? What skills do they need? And how do we prepare not just everybody in the workplace now, but the future generations coming through?
And do you think the involvement of the chambers in this level of activity, because it's one of the outcomes of the FE white paper, so do you think that increased involvement with the chambers of commerce up and down the country and really having that employer voice focused in those different regions, do you think that is going to have the impact that we're going to need as an economy, even if you remove COVID from the situation, in terms of our skills economy? Do you think the impact is going to be there from these kind of initiatives?
I think it's a great start, isn't it? With the research we've done at BCC shows a real disconnect between lots of SMEs and the skills system. And it's absolutely crucial, as we've all said, that, we work together much more closely. So how do you get businesses more involved? How do you help them actually understand what their skills needs are? You're saying they're only planning maybe 6 months ahead. How do you get them to really understand and articulate that and help to plan that locally? Because I think once we've got everybody working to the same goal, we'll have people training for real jobs, good jobs, sustainable jobs that help that progression. And it's not just for the most technically able. And, we're really short, we're crying out for technical skills, particularly at levels 4 and 5. But also for everyone, even at sort of entry-level jobs, everybody needs to upskill. Businesses are not going to be productive unless they take everybody with them. And that means understanding how to engage people, the management and the people skills to bring everybody with you through the workplace, and planning for the skills that you're going to need. And unless everybody's part of that transformation, it won't work. But I think LSIPs are a brilliant way of bringing everybody to the table to understand what we need and how we're going to get there.
Yeah, I agree. I fundamentally agree. I think it's a real strong way to kind of start something that can make a real difference.
Yeah.
I think, Dan, it's just, I think for me, one of the crucial things is the LSIPs are a great starting point, but we've also got the FE accountability frameworks coming. And the one thing I would urge government to do is to make sure these things are joined up, because you can have an LSIP that's great, but if it hasn't got teeth and the local arrangements around accountability haven't got teeth, then what difference is it going to make? We'll have some colleges and training providers and universities who will probably, because they're committed to doing the right thing, do the right thing, whether they've got teeth or not. They'll take account of them and they'll work with them really well. But there'll be others who won't, unless those things are given the right levers and mechanics to make them effective. So I think that join up is going to be crucial.
Yeah,
It's
100%.
the measurement of that as well, isn't it? I agree. I think the measurement of that join up and the exposure that we're wanting to put on specific projects and areas, I think is really important. Yeah.
And I think you're right. It needs to be joined up, doesn't it? I think it sort of leads me to my next question, really, around. We touched on it earlier as well, around different localities have got different skills needs and stuff like that. But also, how do you tie that into national when the future of work is changing, where you don't have to be place based, like Dan and Gareth, you're both expressing around being able to work from home. Do you know what I mean? Like you could be in Cornwall, but also working for an employer that is based in Newcastle. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, how can we sort of make sure this is lined up for the future of work, if you know what I mean, around like sort of continued professional development sort of leads forward. Gareth, I know you've been doing loads of stuff around sort of looking at regionality, and Jane as well. But Gareth, why don't you kick off?
It's interesting. I think there's a really interesting tension in this for me, for want of a better phrase, which is around allowing local flexibility. And as part of that allowing flexibility, then there is, and I understand why, there's a requirement for the government to get a degree of consistency around the country and how things are rolled out and how they work. But what we see repeatedly is the government will say, we want a local solution, we want that to be driven locally, but then they'll give you a template and say, but it has to fit this template. And the template is quite restrictive in some cases. So it's getting the balance right, and then the balance between different areas about not being too prescriptive, because if you take Leicester and Leicestershire, where we're working on the LSIP at the moment as part of the pilots, it's easy to see it as a city and county, but there are certain aspects of the labour market or industrial sectors that are very specific to certain parts of the geography. So having the flexibility, not just to say, there's your plan at that geographic level and you have no flexibility to shift it. It might be that parts of the LTIP apply to only part of the geography, or there might be overlap with another local geography. And I think so those natural industrial geographies or occupational geographies are quite important to have the flexibility to accommodate those and reflect those as well. So in the East Midlands, we've got the former coalfields in North Nottinghamshire and North Derbyshire. And there's a lot more commonality there as there is between, say, North Nottinghamshire and the city or the south side of the city in Nottingham. So how you allow that flexibility moving forwards is going to be crucial. And then the other thing that I think is really important is how government aligns policy nationally, so that where you've got competing or complementary policies, we can get the best out of those. We've got things going on at the moment in the funded world where eligibility for some programs out in some bits of the department don't align with eligibility requirements elsewhere. And you think some of the emerging skills project, for example, employers can go on some really high value manufacturing and future technology courses. There are virtually no eligibility requirements around them. As long as you're working in that sector, you're pretty much good to go. Whereas if you try to go to an FE college or an independent provider for something funded through the adult education budget or another funding stream, there's really tight eligibility around it. So it kind of doesn't make sense at the moment, to some extent, that there needs to be more alignment of those policy areas, I think, to really make it work for people in a seamless way and in a way that they can understand better.
Yeah, Jane, what do you want to sort of add to that?
I absolutely agree. We've got to have flexibility, and I think the sort of, more devolved skills at the local level, local decision making. Again, where these LSIPs come in, what is needed locally. Local people and local stakeholders know what we need, and asking businesses and getting them involved is crucial. And they will tell you, crying out for more people with technical skills, full stop, crying out for people with level 4 and 5 skills. So whether you've got that, whether you're advanced manufacturing, working in net zero, creative, fintech, whatever it is, whatever the local area's speciality, that's where the area needs to focus on the skills. But those are the areas where we need to be preparing people, the future generations, and developing the people we have now. So I think it is about absolutely right. It is about flexibility. It's about making sure the policies, work for us. So it's great that we've got more, as well as full qualifications, we've got more bite-sized modular learning. Businesses tell us that they need to upskill people really quickly. And sometimes an apprenticeship or a long qualification isn't quite right at that time for every person. So this balanced policy, the full qualifications and the more bite-sized, rapid learning delivered in an agile way, that's the right sort of combination that gets businesses the skills they need for the job vacancies they have now, and opens up all that brilliant opportunity for people to retrain or just, do a module that gives them brilliant skills that they can go on and take up an opportunity and progress in their own career, either in that sector or pivoting. So it is about, having the right environment that businesses and individuals can tap into quickly, get what they need and progress.
We're seeing that actually operationally now. If you think about the way adult learning and recruitment and enrollment has gone over the last year, we're seeing a shift in the pattern of delivery with qualifications. So we're seeing more shorter, sharper, unitized delivery as opposed to full qualifications. Because as you say, Jane, people are wanting to get the skills they need to get those jobs quicker. So they're doing units or shorter provision as opposed to the longer stuff. One of the things that I would also say to come in and answer the question, Gareth, is there are certain things that are going to be different up and down the country from a skills need perspective based on geography, based on industry, etc. However, one of the things that I would say there's going to be consistency throughout any occupation anywhere in the country are what I call those essential skills. So I've touched on these in the past, but things like resilience, creativity, personal presentation, communication, all of those core essential skills that you need regardless of your occupation or industry in which you work in. And we're seeing that is, from an employer's perspective, we're seeing that as more of a requirement in some cases than the technical and vocational skills. They equally go hand in hand, and for me are as equally as important. But we're seeing that demand for creativity, innovation, resilience, adaptability within the workplace more than we've ever seen before.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's interesting you said about modularisation as well for people who are, short. It's really, really interesting. I wonder if I could bring in some of our audience, because we've got people getting involved, which is it's a really important topic for everyone. So Lee's saying it's we talk about personal development and the conversational changes become for adults, but also, I think it's about making sure this goes from lifelong. So as we're teaching people around lifelong learning from the get-go. James also had a really interesting point as well around being carried out in the workplace as standards and regulations are not followed by some training companies that hand out certificates but no proven practical or theoretical knowledge. I think that goes into your modularisation, doesn't it, Dan? Around that we need to bring this into place and sort of make sure we do have that. So it is professional development, isn't it? It's sort of
it doesn't have to be necessarily regulated. There are various forms of professional development. So some will be regulated, some may not be regulated. But for me, as long as the quality of delivery in terms of that teaching, learning, assessment, mentoring, coaching, whatever that may be, as long as the quality and the standard of that is, upheld and has integrity and has good quality assurance practices in place to make sure that whoever's in front of you, deploying programs to you, or even if you're doing things distance learning online, because an e-learning and being immersed in situational content is equally as high quality. As long as the quality is right, for me, I'm less precious about whether it's regulated or not. Obviously, there'll be certain things that you would need to be awarded a regulated qualification for in order to, prove occupational competency. And there'll be certain sectors, where there's license to practice and various, qualifications that you have to have. But it's about that full spectrum. And to the other point, absolutely right. It's about lifelong learning. I remember when I was back in the college days, one of my apprentices was 67. and she was doing performance manufacturing operations at 67, and loved it. I'm chair of governors for a primary school, and the amount of extracurricular activities that take place to make sure that we're shaping the whole child, an individual, not just the national curriculum, but that added value. It goes right through the education ecosystem.
I think that's really interesting, Dan. Just from an employer point of view, what we've found in the LSIP locally is at the point of recruitment, behaviours employers are telling us are more important than vocational or technical skills. And so we're building our LSIP from a point of view of, rather than the skills improvement, local skills improvement plan, we're building a local KSBs, a knowledge, skills and behaviours improvement plan. And what's come out is at different stages in the journey, behaviours are really important all the way through, coming back to Lee's point about those things continuing, that cognitive development continuing right through adulthood. We've absolutely seen at the point of recruitment, those behaviours are more important. And what we're also getting feedback from the colleges involved and from the employers is there's been a direction of travel recently which has funded the vocational and technical elements better than it has the behaviours and the associated, what colleges are loosely term and other businesses term an enrichment activity. And they're having to try and shoehorn that in without it necessarily being funded to the same sort of levels. Yet businesses are telling us actually they're as important, if not more important, especially in the development of young people coming into the workforce.
And I think that's probably one of the positives of the apprenticeship reform, isn't it? Because when you look at the differences on apprenticeship standards, that it now, include behaviours as well as knowledge and skills, which are delivered, they're monitored, the progress of them, and endpoint assessed. That's a real good example. T-levels being another, where we're actually looking at the education system and saying, okay, actually, from a behaviour as well as a knowledge and skills perspective, how can we structure that and give it the right framework to make sure it's giving that person at the end everything they need to have a successful career and a fulfilling life?
Yeah, and I totally agree. I also got Lindsay dropping in as well to basically saying exactly what you're saying there, Dan, around collaboration, but also around embedding skills as well, and being joined up. We're just trying to bring everyone in who's trying to get involved from the audience as well. We're nearly out of time, but I know there's so much more I want to be able to cover with you. I mean, Dan, I know you want to talk about.
I've got another question, which is kind of looking forward. So, if we think about, the hashtag at the top of the screen, this is about the future of work. And the last of the series of various different high quality conversations about that. But I suppose my question to the floor is around, various different areas of professional development and the future of work. What do you think we should be looking at and focusing on, let's say, over the next 5 to 10 years to actually make sure we're having an impact, not only on the individual recipient, but the businesses, the economies, their local geographies from a social mobility perspective? What are the main areas of professional development within the future that we should be looking to focus on over the next 5 to 10 years? And I'm opening that up to the floor, so anyone can comment on that one.
I'll start you off, Dan. I think it's difficult to say what the areas of professional development should be, but I think they need to be aligned to what the ambition is for the locality. So there are parts of the country where there are particularly low levels of level 4 and level 5 technical qualifications, but that might be okay based on the type of place they want to be. Equally, you might need to be disruptive and say, do you know what, if we continue like that, we're going to become a commuter town, and everyone who's going to be capable and skilled to do a better job is going to move out and move somewhere else for work and may just live here, and will become a dormant commuter town, and that's not what we want. So there's got to be an element of disruption and a future planning. And I think whatever the detail of the professional development is, it's got to be aligned locally to the ambition for the local area. And the labour market has to reflect that, but community has to, the place side of things. So where do you want to live? What sort of community do you want that to be in local labour market, local economy do you want it to be? And therefore you can align the skills to it. But unless you've got a common vision of where you're trying to get, it's not going to come together.
And that's where collaboration comes in, isn't it? Because it's about your FE providers within that area. It's about the employers within that area, your local authorities, your chambers, all of that.
interestingly, it's about the employers who aren't necessarily yet in your local area, but who may consider it. So as we see technologies, and battery technologies have been a big area of focus for investment recently.
Yes.
And I'm sure on the back of what's unfortunately happening over in the Ukraine and Eastern Europe at the moment, we'll see other emerging energy technologies and focuses will reshore some of our own energy development to future-proof the country. And as a result of that, we'll probably see investment that doesn't exist yet. And we'll see people looking at where should I go with this investment? So therefore, how do we put propositions together to those organisations to say, come to South Leicestershire, come to wherever you may be in the country, and we'll work with you to give you the workforce you need for the future.
I've seen a real good example of that very recently, local to where I live. So I live in East Yorkshire in a port, and the Humber local enterprise partnership, which is now the whole East Yorkshire enterprise partnership, have done a fantastic job of that in terms of bringing businesses into the area. So we've just had Siemens invest significantly in a new rail factory. So in Goole, they're going to be making the new trains for the London Underground. There's current consultation at the moment around a potential nuclear power investment by 2030, I think it is. So, there's real good examples of that happening up and down the country. And locally where I live, we've seen real benefit from that. We've seen more, as a result of Siemens investing here, we've seen more businesses come into the area. We've seen more houses being built. We've seen more local infrastructure being put in place in our roadworks, within our services, which has then had a massive economic boost for what was a small town.
Yeah, it's really cool. We're totally out of time, but I want to ask two more questions actually. We touched on it earlier, like we've world of work, where we work is all changed. We're being more productive because people weren't traveling so much. Now they're starting to travel. I've been asked to go to London and a lot more. I've forgot how annoying that train is. Do you know what I mean? How many times it's delayed and just totally annoying. But how do we make sure that we don't, with CPD, with lifelong learning, we don't lumber on to people already when they've stacked up a load more time, and when they're being released to be able to do other stuff, that we don't then overstretch them and cause well-being issues by trying to lumber on too much. I'm all up for productivity and continually learning, but how do we get that balance that makes sure that we don't lumber it onto our staff? Jane, I wonder if you could maybe share that just really briefly, because we're totally out of time. But I just think it's a question that's touched on, but no one really talks about it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think crucially, it's about management skills as well, isn't it? So people management skills, making sure that, that managers are bringing everybody on in the workplace, developing them to develop, to reach those productivity goals and those growth goals. So it's understanding how to coach people and support people, and maybe people who haven't been in learning for a while, finding the right connections and partnerships with local providers to bring those people on to, as I said before, everybody's involved in that transformation, and having these shorter modular courses that don't mean that people are overfaced or put off by 2 or 3 years worth of studies and essays again, but what they practically can do that gives them the confidence and the skills to progress. So I think it is about management. We've got this massive change. We've got more digital automation, net zero. It's a fantastic time of opportunity, but it's just how we make sure everybody's involved in that and how we sort of get everybody on that ladder of progression. That for me is the really exciting bit.
Yeah, no, definitely. Right, I'm going to wrap it. So, we could talk I think we could be here for about 3 hours, sort of talk about this. If you could dream and dream big, what would you want to see for the future of CPD, lifelong learning, and the future of work? Gareth, what would you want to see?
The survey findings we've had from business show that they're willing to contribute and expect to contribute about 60 or 70% of the cost of this. But the publicly funded aspect is what sets young people up for work. So the one thing I would like to see is joined up policy, better join up of policy across, even within government departments, but across government departments as well. It's cyclic. Gavin, we go through these cycles. We had really tight join up between skills and the Department for Work and Pensions and stuff 10 years ago. that's kind of drifted apart. They're trying to bring it back together. There's no reason for it to be cyclic in that way, cyclic. So for me, that joined up policy would make a huge difference.
Yeah, no, very cool. I agree. Everyone needs to come together. It needs to be a collaboration of everyone, doesn't it? Jane, what would you want to see? If you could dream big, what would you want to see for CPD and lifelong learning in the future of work?
I'd like to see all firms adopt this high performance learning culture. What that basically means is they're bringing everybody on, they're reaching their goals through their people, through developing and training their people. They're investing more and they're better engaged at the local level with training providers and everyone else in this agenda.
Yeah, that's really cool. Dan, what would you want to see?
I'd like to see better quality and better access to careers education, information, advice and guidance at all levels of the learner journey, at all ages. I think, we focus and we there's real gaps in the education ecosystem and that lifelong learning journey because people are unaware of what is available to them and they're also unaware of their own capabilities. So I think, better CIAG at all levels of education.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. Everyone, thank you so much for your time. So I know we've gone over, so audience, I'm sorry. Thank you, everyone. It's such a good conversation. I didn't want to end it. And this is the end of the second season. We're exploring other stuff. We're going to look at different formats, actually. And this has been a really, really cool season. I want to say thank you to everyone at NCFE that's put this together. Sam, who's been lead on production, has been absolutely fantastic. Lindsay, as always, is brilliant. Team FE News, Leah, thank you so much. Finley, Kelly, and Dan, thank you I think you've hosted about half of these, so thank you so much. Gareth and Jane, thank you so much for joining us today. Really, really interesting conversation. And see you all really soon. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks ever so much.
Cheers, guys.
Take care.
Bye.